Loneliness is your only friend, and everyone treats that like it's a tragedy, like you're broken, like you're lost, like you're someone who needs saving. But here's what they don't understand. Here's what they'll never admit. Loneliness didn't happen to you. You earned it. You survived your way into it. Because loneliness isn't the absence of people. It's the presence of standards. It's what happens when you refuse to settle for shallow connections just to avoid being alone. When you choose silence over fake conversations. When you realize that being surrounded by the wrong people is lonelier than being by yourself. You're not alone because nobody wants you. You're alone because you stopped wanting people who weren't real. And that's not sad. That's evolution. So if loneliness is your only friend, then congratulations, you're in good company. The best company, actually. Because loneliness is the most honest friend you'll ever have. Why loneliness chose you? Loneliness didn't pick you randomly. It picked you because you're different. Because you see through the bullshit that everyone else accepts. Because you feel things deeper than people who just glide across the surface. Because you ask questions that make people uncomfortable. Because you demand depth in a world that rewards shallow. You're the person who can't do small talk, who can't pretend to care about things that don't matter, who can't fake enthusiasm for conversations that go nowhere. You tried. You went to the gatherings. You smiled at the parties. You nodded along to conversations about nothing. And you felt more alone in those crowds than you ever did by yourself. Because being surrounded by people who don't see you is worse than being alone. Being in conversations where nobody really listens is more isolating than silence. So you stopped going. You stopped pretending. You stopped forcing yourself into spaces where you had to be someone you're not, just to fit in. And that's when loneliness arrived. Not as punishment, but as relief. Finally you could stop performing. Finally you could just be. People call that isolation. I call it liberation. Because you're not hiding from the world. You're protecting yourself from people who would drain you just to avoid their own emptiness. You're not running away. You're standing still while everyone else runs in circles, pretending they're going somewhere. Loneliness chose you because you're strong enough to handle it. Most people aren't. Most people need constant noise and distraction and validation just to avoid facing themselves. But you? You can sit in silence. You can be alone with your thoughts. You can exist without an audience. That's not weakness. That's power. Let me tell you about the company you're in. Every person who changed the world spent time alone. Every thinker who saw clearly spent time in silence. Every creator who made something real spent time away from the noise. Because greatness requires solitude. Truth requires silence. Growth requires space. You can't think deeply when you're constantly surrounded. You can't hear yourself when everyone else is talking. You can't become who you're meant to be when you're busy being who everyone else needs. So loneliness doesn't just choose the broken. It chooses the ones who are becoming, the ones who are questioning, the ones who are evolving, the ones who are too busy growing to waste time on people who want them to stay small. You're in the company of everyone who ever mattered. Everyone who ever created something that lasted. Everyone who ever saw what others couldn't see. They were all called lonely. They were all told to be more social. They were all pressured to fit in. And they all refused. Because they knew something everyone else didn't. That loneliness is temporary, but regret is permanent. That being alone for a season is better than being surrounded by the wrong people for a lifetime. That solitude is where you find yourself, and crowds are where you lose yourself. So if loneliness is your only friend right now, then you're exactly where you need to be. Not forever, not permanently, but for now. Because this is the season where you're being refined, where you're learning what matters, where you're discovering who you are without the influence of people who never really knew you. This is the cocoon. And you can't rush the transformation. You can't force yourself back into crowds before you're ready, just because loneliness feels uncomfortable. You have to sit in it, learn from it. Let it teach you what people never could, what loneliness teaches that people don't. Loneliness taught you things that being surrounded never did. It taught you that you're enough, that you don't need constant validation to prove you exist, that your worth isn't determined by how many people text you back. It taught you who you really are, not the version you perform for others, but the real, raw, honest you that exists when nobody's watching. It taught you what you actually like, what you actually think, what you actually want. Because when you're always around people, you're always influenced, always performing, always adjusting yourself to fit the room. But in loneliness, there's no room to fit. There's no audience to perform for. There's just you and your truth. And that truth might be uncomfortable at first. It might show you things about yourself you didn't want to see. It might reveal that you've been living for other people's approval, that you've been chasing things you don't even want, that you've been pretending to be happy in situations that were killing you. But that revelation is necessary, because you can't change what you don't acknowledge. You can't heal what you won't face. You can't become who you're meant to be while still pretending to be who they want. Loneliness strips away the pretense. It removes the mask. It forces you to face yourself. And yes, that's terrifying. Yes, that's painful. Yes, that makes you want to run back to the comfort of crowds. But don't. Because this is where the real work happens. This is where you stop being who they shaped you to be and start becoming who you choose to be. This is where you stop seeking approval and start seeking truth. This is where you stop performing and start living. Loneliness taught you that you can survive without them, that you don't need constant company to be okay. That silence isn't something to fear, but something to embrace. And once you learn that, once you really understand that, you become unstoppable, because you're no longer negotiating from a place of need. You're no longer desperate for connection. You're no longer willing to sacrifice yourself just to avoid being alone. You become someone who only lets people in when they've earned it. Someone who protects their peace instead of giving it away. Someone who knows that being alone is better than being with the wrong people. That's what loneliness teaches. And that lesson is worth every moment of discomfort. Why they fear your loneliness. People are scared of your loneliness, not because they care about you, because it threatens them. Your ability to be alone challenges their need to constantly surround themselves with noise. Your comfort in solitude exposes their fear of facing themselves. Your refusal to settle for shallow connections highlights how shallow their own connections are. So they try to fix you. They tell you to get out more, to be more social, to stop isolating yourself. But they're not worried about you. They're worried about what your loneliness says about their choices. Because if you can be happy alone, then what does that say about their need to never be alone? If you can find peace in silence, then what does that say about their constant need for noise? If you can evolve in solitude, then what does that say about their stagnation in crowds? Your loneliness is a mirror. and they don't like what they see in it. They see their own emptiness, their own fear, their own inability to be comfortable with themselves. So they project. They call you antisocial. They say you're depressed. They insist something's wrong with you. Because accepting that you're actually okay would mean accepting that they're not. That they're the ones running. That they're the ones hiding. That they're the ones who can't handle being alone with their own thoughts. Your loneliness threatens the lie they tell themselves. The lie that being surrounded by people means they're not lonely. But you know the truth. You've been in those crowds. You've been surrounded by people and felt completely alone. You know that loneliness isn't about being physically alone. It's about being emotionally disconnected. And you can be disconnected in a room full of people, or connected to yourself in complete solitude. You chose the latter. And that choice terrifies people who are still choosing the former. So let them be scared. Let them judge. Let them try to convince you that something's wrong with you. You know better. You know that loneliness is teaching you what their company never could. But let's be honest. Sometimes loneliness hurts. Sometimes you do want someone to talk to. Someone who gets it. Someone who sees you. Sometimes the silence gets heavy. The solitude gets overwhelming. The isolation feels like too much. And that's okay. That's human. You're not superhuman. You're not immune to wanting connection. You're not above needing people. You just need the right people. And that's why loneliness hurts. Because you're not sad about being alone. You're sad about the lack of real connection in a world full of fake people. You're not mourning solitude. You're mourning the absence of someone who can actually understand you. You're not crying about being by yourself. You're crying about the fact that most people can't handle the real you. That's the loneliness that cuts deep. Not the physical aloneness, but the emotional isolation. The feeling that you could be in a room full of people and still feel like nobody really knows you. The reality that you could have 1,000 followers and 0 real friends. The truth that you could be surrounded by family and still feel like an orphan. That's what you're really feeling. And that pain is valid. But here's what you need to understand. That pain is temporary. You're in the waiting room, the in-between space, the season where you're alone because the right people haven't arrived yet. And they won't arrive until you stop filling your life with the wrong ones. You have to clear out the noise to make room for the signal. You have to empty the space to make room for what's real. That means sitting in loneliness for a while. That means being uncomfortable. That means waiting. But waiting alone is better than being with people who make you feel alone. Temporary solitude is better than permanent disconnection. Short-term loneliness is better than long-term emptiness. So feel the pain. Acknowledge it. Let yourself be sad about it. But don't let it convince you to go back to crowds that don't see you. Don't let it push you back into connections that drain you. Stay in the loneliness. Learn from it. Let it refine you. Because the right people, the ones who will actually see you, are looking for someone who knows themselves. And you can't know yourself in crowds. You can only know yourself in solitude. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely. Being alone is a choice. Being lonely is a feeling. You can be alone and not lonely. You can be surrounded and still lonely. Right now, you're both. You're alone and you're lonely. And that's the hardest combination. Because you chose the alone part. But the lonely part chose you. You chose to step away from fake people. You chose to protect your peace. You chose quality over quantity. But you didn't choose to feel this empty. You didn't choose to ache for real connection. You didn't choose to want someone who isn't there. That feeling found you, and it hurts. But here's what that feeling is really telling you. It's telling you that you're capable of deep connection, that you're not numb, that you haven't given up. It's telling you that you still want something real, that you still believe it exists, that you're still open to it. The lonely feeling isn't your enemy. It's your compass. It's pointing you toward what you actually need. Real connection, deep understanding, genuine intimacy. Not the shallow stuff you walked away from. Not the surface level interactions you're done with. But real connection with real people who can handle the real you. And feeling lonely for that is healthy. It's normal. It's human. The problem isn't that you feel lonely. The problem is that most people try to solve loneliness with quantity instead of quality. They surround themselves with bodies to avoid the feeling. They fill the space with noise to drown out the ache. But you're doing something different. You're sitting with the loneliness. You're feeling the ache. You're refusing to fill the space with anything less than what you actually need. That takes courage. That takes strength. That takes faith that something better exists. And it does. It absolutely does. But you won't find it by going back to what didn't work. You'll find it by becoming someone who attracts what does. And that becoming happens in the alone, in the quiet, in the loneliness. Here's what happens when you stop fighting loneliness and start embracing it. You discover things about yourself you never knew, talents you never explored, thoughts you never had time to think. You start creating, building, making, because you're not distracted by everyone else's needs and opinions and expectations. You start healing, really healing, from wounds you didn't even know you had, because healing requires stillness, and you can't be still when you're constantly surrounded. You start becoming selective, not because you're bitter, but because you know what you need now. You know what drains you and what fills you. You know what's worth your energy and what isn't. You become someone who says no without guilt, who protects their peace without apologizing, who chooses quality without compromising. You become dangerous in the best way. Dangerous to people who want to use you. Dangerous to systems that want to control you. Dangerous to anyone who benefits from you staying small. Because solitude makes you independent. And independent people can't be manipulated. You stop needing validation. Stop seeking approval. Stop performing for people who don't deserve a show. You become whole, complete, sufficient, not because you don't want connection, but because you don't need it to be okay. And that's when real connection finds you. When you stop desperately seeking it. When you stop trying to force it with the wrong people. When you become so complete on your own that you only let people in who add to your peace, not disturb it. That's the paradox. You have to become okay with loneliness to attract the people who will end it. You have to be complete alone to find people who complement you instead of complete you. You have to love your own company before anyone else's company is worth having. And once you get there, once you really embrace the loneliness, everything changes. The right people start appearing. Not because you're looking for them, but because you've become someone they're looking for. Someone who knows themselves. Someone who's done the work. Someone who's comfortable in their own skin. That person is rare. That person is valuable. That person attracts quality. So embrace the loneliness. Don't fight it. Don't rush it. Don't try to escape it. Let it teach you. Let it change you. Let it prepare you for the connections that are coming. Here's the truth about your loneliness that nobody's telling you. It's not permanent. It's not a life sentence. It's not your identity. It's a season. A necessary season. A season where you're becoming who you need to be. You won't be lonely forever, but you will be different forever. The loneliness will end, but the lessons you learned in it will stay. The strength you built, the self-knowledge you gained, the standards you set, those are permanent. Those are yours to keep. So this isn't wasted time. This isn't lost years. This isn't pointless suffering. This is your transformation, your education, your evolution. Every night you spend alone is a night you spend learning, growing, becoming. Every moment of loneliness is a moment of preparation for the life that's coming. The life where you only let in people who've earned it, where you only invest in relationships that reciprocate, where you only give your time to people who value it. That life is being built right now, in the silence, in the solitude, in the loneliness. So don't waste it wishing you were somewhere else. Don't spend it regretting being alone. Spend it becoming. Spend it building. Spend it preparing. Because when the right people show up, and they will, you need to be ready. You need to be someone who knows their worth, who protects their peace, who doesn't settle. You need to be someone who's done the work, who's faced themselves, who's healed their wounds. You can't be that person in crowds. You can only be that person in solitude. So your loneliness isn't a punishment. It's a privilege. It's the space you need to become who you're meant to be. The time you need to heal what needs healing. The silence you need to hear yourself. Not everyone gets this opportunity. Most people run from loneliness their entire lives. They fill every moment with noise and people and distractions just to avoid facing themselves. But you're different. You're brave enough to sit in it, strong enough to learn from it. That makes you rare. That makes you valuable. That makes you someone worth knowing. So if loneliness is your only friend right now, then you're in the best company possible. You're in the company of everyone who ever grew, everyone who ever changed, everyone who ever became something more than what they were. You're in the company of thinkers and creators and people who refuse to settle for shallow. You're in the company of everyone who chose truth over comfort, depth over surface, quality over quantity. That's not sad company. That's elite company. So stop apologizing for being alone. Stop letting people make you feel broken for choosing solitude. Stop explaining yourself to people who will never understand that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from everyone and find yourself. You're not alone because you're unwanted. You're alone because you're becoming. You're not isolated because you're broken. You're isolated because you're healing. You're not lonely because you're unlovable. You're lonely because you're learning to love yourself first. And once you do, once you really love yourself, once you're really comfortable in your own company, the loneliness will end. Not because people will finally see you, but because you'll finally see which people are worth letting in. Not because you'll lower your standards, but because you'll meet people who meet them. Not because you'll stop being selective, but because you'll find people who pass the selection. And those people, those rare, real, worthy people, they're out there. They're in their own loneliness right now, learning the same lessons, building the same strength, becoming the same kind of person. And when you meet them, when you finally cross paths, it won't be like meeting a stranger. It'll be like meeting someone who's been on the same journey, who speaks the same language, who understands without explanation. That's what's coming. That's what you're preparing for. So embrace the loneliness. Honor it. Thank it even. Because it's keeping you safe from the wrong people. It's preparing you for the right ones. It's teaching you lessons that will protect you forever. It's building strength that will serve you always. Loneliness is your only friend right now. But it's the friend that's preparing you for friendships that will actually last. It's the companion that's teaching you how to be your own companion. It's the silence that's helping you hear your own voice. And when you finally hear it, when you finally know yourself, when you finally love your own company, the loneliness won't be lonely anymore. It'll just be peace. So stay in it, learn from it, let it change you, because the person you're becoming in this loneliness is the person who will attract everything you've been waiting for. And that person is worth every moment of solitude. You're not alone because nobody wants you. You're alone because you're becoming someone everyone will want, but only the right ones will get. That's not tragedy, that's victory. So if loneliness is your only friend, congratulations. You're in the best company you've ever been in, your own. And that's the only company that matters.